So this is my house. My partner Carrie and I bought this in November, and we bought it because we were no longer hip enough as slowly approaching middle-aged lesbians to live in West Asheville. So we had to go where all the other white people go, which is over to Maney Avenue in North Asheville. So there we are. So being an old house and being nerds, we got to looking into the history of our house and pulled up our deed, and a little surprised that it being a Negro person or any other degree of Negro blood or a person of bad character wasn't welcome in my neighborhood back in the 20s, and this is pretty common for North Asheville. And then that got me thinking about kind of just development in our community in general, and this is the homeowners loan corporation map known as the Hulk maps, and they graded cities. And what I want you to pay attention to here are the red areas, because I'm going to be talking about those a lot, and a lot of us are familiar with the term redlining. And redlining paved the way for urban redevelopment in our city, and if you haven't heard this history, I encourage you to look into it. But in the mid-'70s, these redline neighborhoods obviously had some problems because they didn't have the level of investment that my neighborhood did. They had housing problems, but the solution shouldn't have been, let's bulldoze these neighborhoods and destroy communities. Parallel to urban redevelopment was when was public housing and when we started putting that. And if you look, the blue dots are public housing units or communities added to the red line neighborhoods and layered poverty on poverty. And as you see in my neighborhood, which if you follow the star, I didn't have that problem. But that was in the past, and here we have Asheville today. We're growing, we're developing. The cranes in our skyline are an indicator of good economic development. Everybody's thriving. I am. I certainly benefited from the West Asheville housing market. But let's check in with our red line neighborhoods. Here you'll see that they're not doing quite well. I've been very fortunate in Asheville and have been able to be part of the community. I have, as I mentioned, I've benefited from the real estate market. But our neighborhoods that were redlined are still some of our poorest neighborhoods in our city. Also, some of our poorest neighborhoods are also our neighborhoods that are most non-white. I don't really like the term minority, and I wanted to fix that. But our poor neighborhoods are isolated, they're not supported, and we have deep problems in them. And so that's kind of the academic way to look at it, but just from a real practical matter, when we think about access to food in grocery stores, in my neighborhood, I can walk to the end of my road, I can go either direction and have 3 grocery stores this way and 3 grocery stores this way, no problems with access. If I live down in the South Side neighborhood, below downtown, the closest grocery store is Hopi and Company or the food co-op. Not good access. Back to my neighborhood and my privileged white neighborhood, the thing that I wanted to communicate is that because I have privilege from my neighborhood, I also have a responsibility as a community member to make things better and not just ride on that privilege and that opportunity that the city has given me. So I'm going to tell you, and I have lots of opinions about how to do that. I'm going to start with my neighborhood. The star is my house. In my neighborhood, those blocks, I have six duplexes, including mine, and 1 apartment complex right in that small area. This, under current zoning rules today, is not allowed. We also need to rethink our strategy on multifamily development. Over the last 10 years, for every 8 units of multifamily housing that we've put on the market, we've developed 30 single-family residential units at a higher cost of land, a higher cost of infrastructure, and a higher cost of lots of other things. The encouraging thing is that our city, we've done lots of things wrong, as I've talked about. We're on the path of doing some things right, and the city, I want to encourage you to show up at Planning and Zoning and Council to support the changes that are going to allow for small-scale residential infill in our neighborhood, including more duplexes, to disperse some of that poverty. The other thing I'm encouraging you to get behind is learn about our city's transportation projects. One of the reasons that our neighborhoods are remaining poor and is their isolation due to transportation patterns. We have a lot of things going on. The I-26 connector, this is down in the River Arts District, and the reason I'm talking about transportation is that transportation systems in North Carolina have adversely affected our minority communities. And most of us are familiar with the Burton Street community that was established back in the 20s by a black guy for black folks. And it was a real good place, good sense of community, but it has been hit. The map over here is back in 49. Over there is 2016, showing how 240 cut that neighborhood in half, and we're growing and developing again, and we're looking at hitting that neighborhood once again. And I don't have the solution for this, but that transportation problem is a long-term sustainability problem where we need to get on our bikes and walk and do transit. And this here is, I want to shift that to the connected conversation of gentrification. This is looking at the South Side neighborhood, that should say 2016 at the end. This is a neighborhood that is just now starting to feel the effects of gentrification. You can see that development is slowly creeping in. I also don't have the magic solution for gentrification, but what I want us to think about before I end is, I like green space. This is an area in West Asheville. I struggle with growth and development all the time. It's a pain in the butt when it happens to us. But with this development, it's over in West Asheville. When it was in front of P&Z, folks didn't like it because this was their green space, birds were there, nature was happening, and then the damn developers came in and ruined everything. But the thing about this is we have to think about, there are things that we value, and if we're only looking at what we value, we're often doing that at a sacrifice to the most vulnerable in our community. And I just want to end by saying, this is a quote, don't say no to development, don't say yes, and say yes but. Ultimately come to an end result that is far better than if you had rejected it or if you had blindly accepted it. And that's where I want us to go with growth and development in our city.